But yeah. Okay, so this is the second lecture recorded for a special course, introductory course in Mardukite Systemology called The Power of Zu. It's going to be Systemology Air Command Report number 22, December 19. And this lecture is called The Nature of Zu, Identifying the Vital Energy. Okay, so we have some logic and some math, and you don't need to know anything about that at this point. But it is fully described and relayed within our textbooks, and this surrounds what we call the standard model. And this is used in Mardukite Zuism and Mardukite Systemology, essentially to validate application of a theoretical construct that we're calling the Zu line. So this Zu line, it's described as such only to demonstrate its continuity and interconnectivity as an identity. It's not necessarily any kind of an actual or ethereal chord or such. It may very well be on some level of energetic observation, but any vision of such when using astral vision, for example, is entirely a construct or thought form of the observer. Okay, if there is any type of cord connecting the I of the alpha spirit to some physical body, the genetic vehicle, it could only be of one type of substance. And we may conclude this as a result of self-honest examination of all that we can observe directly concerning cosmic law in the physical universe. So as a result of what we were able to calculate using the applied spiritual technologies alluded on the Tablets of Destiny, this surpasses all formal philosophies of metaphysics, anything that has come before, all the formal spiritual philosophies. And this leads us to a point of understanding that there is only one actual force or essence connecting the spiritual and the physical along a continuum, and that is Zu, what we're calling Zu. So we're deriving our philosophic and semantic understanding of Zu directly from the ancient Mardukite wisdom tablets, which are found buried beneath Babylonian cuneiform literature. It's what you've studied in the grade 2 materials of the Mardukite core. In fact, many of these ancient spiritual allegories may be found within the context of ancient Babylonian Anunnaki mythology, and hence the emergence of modern Zuism to satisfy what is otherwise found to be a social gap, since for all of the books and discussions and pop culture television shows reaching millions with the idea of an alien religion or Anunnaki spiritual tradition, we don't find any valid avenues for a seeker to explore it as a reality. Likewise, it should be understood that the more advanced processes and continuing developments of Mardukite systemology that are applied as spiritual techniques directly to the religious and spiritual connotations of Mardukite Zuism, these are not dependent on personal adherence or a participation with any revivalist religion in order to be valid, as an effective spiritual science in its own right. Just as the concepts and validity behind exercises of prayer and meditation are not specific to any one paradigm or tradition, even if each one provides their own flavor or theme of instruction toward such methods. So, undoubtedly, we're going to have those that are interested in the spiritual side of this. We're going to have those that are interested in the science of this. We're going to have those that are interested in specifically the spiritual technologies behind this. And they all are interconnected. They're not exclusive to one another. They don't require any specialized belief in order to make them effective and workable. There are many mystics and magicians and priests, priestesses, and shamans, esoteric intellectuals that have come upon some degree of understanding regarding cosmic law in the past. And those who have seen something of its significance in regards of life and actualized awareness have gone in search for the spiritual life energy that is not accounted for in the descriptions and axioms that describe the physical universe. The biochemical and cellular matters are accounted for regarding the organism. There are even ways of understanding the motors and nervous system, but again, only concerning the genetic vehicle itself. Nothing concerning the spiritual life energy or vital energy that is not physical. For in science, we have no true physical understanding of consciousness or actualized awareness directly. And anything that may be determined in regards to self may just as easily be distorted by fragmented sensory experience and erroneous memory. So, this basically has led us to seek effective methods of defragmentation, because without which we would not actually have any certainty about our so-called rising above or moving beyond what it means to be a reactive response, programmed and conditioned identity trapped within the beta awareness of a physical body. Okay, so I have some notes here concerning some of the research that went into things and how that unfolded. But really, in the past, many other metaphysical and esoteric and occult attempts have been made in developing a working philosophy or applied spiritual technology to varying degrees of success. And it's easy to find traces of this in any literature that relates to some vital energy or spiritual life energy. And you'll find this under the context of the aether and the ether and astral light and azoth and clear light and divine energy and divine light, divine spark, God force, glama, God mind, Kia, lifeforce, logos, orgone, prana, ruach. Sorry if I didn't get that right for you Semitic speaking. Spirit, starfire, and yeah, any subtle energy, universal energy, and I know some people out there just love the subject of vril. Right, so all of these word names have been used in the past to describe this unique spiritual life energy that connects the other, or spiritual universe, the alpha, or metaphysical universe, to the physical universe, or beta existence that we readily experience from the perspective of the physical body, which is composed of physical matter of the physical universe, and biochemically processes physical energy in the physical universe. So, the name that we've chosen to demonstrate this vital energy or spiritual life energy is based on the oldest written language from the inception of social and cultural systems defining the human condition, specifically in ancient Mesopotamia. And the name we have chosen is very specifically Zu, and it may be used in place of any of these others, so long as you're following the knowledge of the standard model. And we use Zu now as a semantic for understanding exactly what we are in search of in order to fully understand, appreciate, and apply the wisdom of the Anunnaki Tablets of Destiny. So, whenever spiritual life energy or vital life force is encountered within the scope of Mardukite Zuism and Mardukite Systemology, it's treated as Zu. And this ancient Sumerian cuneiform expression is used to denote the unique life awareness that connects spiritual existence to physical existence. These two existences are appropriately defined on the arcane tablets as An for the spiritual universe and Ki for the physical universe. Now, it's unfortunate because some scholars in the past have restricted their understanding of these terms as literally heaven and earth, respectively. It's really the advanced interpretations provided by our standard model in its relationship to the all and the law, as described in the body of the ancient Babylonian epic of creation, has also led us to equate these two existences in terms of alpha and beta. And this is explained in more detail in our official textbooks for this grade, such as Tablets of Destiny and Crystal Clear. So the word Zu is sometimes applied in different contexts, although each of them is still true to the original meaning behind the word. In one sense, we have the application of a broad stream, band, or ray of spiritual life energy that is considered the vital life force of a living organism. But the word Zu also is in reference to the verb to know, as in the ability and capacity to know, or the extent to which someone is filled with knowledge, literally, by the design of the cuneiform sign, what it represents. But for our modern purposes of codifying the systemology at hand into a coherent and applicable methodology, this idea has been most strongly expressed with the word awareness, specifically what we refer to as actualized awareness. When we use the Zu line as a description of awareness, particularly the awareness as applied to beta existence or the physical universe, a person's capacity or effective ability to direct personal Zu is also considered a reflection of their personal magnetism, which is understood at this time to be a radiation of this vital life force into one's environment, in the physical universe and interactions with other life. Although the religious applications of Mardukite Zuism and the applied spiritual technologies of Mardukite Systemology, the full scope of next-gen Systemology for that matter, are intended to provide an effective, workable philosophy of life, the universe, and everything. It will be immediately noticed by those so inclined that the methods and realizations presented throughout the esoteric library of Systemology has within it many applications, or validations perhaps even more answers regarding traditional occult sciences or mysticism, energy healing, and New Age metaphysics than these paradigms actually offer from within themselves. Although we do not necessarily treat the ritualism and cultural symbols of traditional magic in Systemology directly, it's interesting to take this up in a wide-angle perspective that includes Zu and the Standard Model, because our application of this higher understanding necessarily describes or accounts for various phenomenon that could very well contribute to a significant amount of what people consider supernatural or otherworldly, especially if they do not have this higher level of understanding and awareness. It's not our intention to directly validate or invalidate or otherwise explain specifics of any of this phenomenon, especially as it's been described by the semantics of other paradigms, but other than an effort to strongly express the fact that the further a seeker travels on the pathway to self-honesty, the greater of a true understanding is attained, including realizations, of course, concerning many of these other facets of existence, which just seem to line up in our reasoning thereafter. It's just the way it works. They do not require as much attention at these higher grades of work because they are no longer treated as a mystery. So the lectures that I'm giving in this series are really meant to inspire or cultivate a greater understanding and appreciation for what we are calling Zu within this next-gen semantic paradigm. By introducing the ancient wisdom and universal truths under this context, under a fresh concept or terminology, it's far easier to repair erroneous and faulty programmed understanding of the same universes without having to spend unnecessary energy in reshaping thousands of years of cultural vocabulary and the manner of its reception and understanding by the individual. So ours is a preferable approach, even in light of the fact that some individuals will find it mentally taxing to tackle this field or study under the guise of some borrowed, obscure, ancient terms. But I have good news, because I can assure the reader and seeker and follower and any practitioner that's going to be working along with our materials that it is no less complicated or less ambiguous to apply any of the other terms previously used in related esoteric lore, such as ruach and orgone or vril and so forth, because each of these it would require an extensive background lesson in cultural language and mythographic understanding to even be close to carrying the same effectiveness for systemology. So we aren't starting from scratch per se, but we are using a fresh new look and bridging yesterday and today with new eyes. That's why we call it next gen. So in one sense, when we refer to Zu as the primary spiritual life energy that is present in our known existence, but which necessarily has a source or cause that is exterior to what is considered the physical universe, we consider this Zu to be a permeating principle of awareness that is beyond the physical energy and physical matter that we associate with physical manifestation. And clearly, there is an element of consciousness that is not accounted for in the elements, chemicals, substance forms that are identified as physical. However, in saying this, it should be understood that Zu is not literally and exclusively the mind itself either, which is a system of manifestation that actually processes, carries, and otherwise communicates the Zu apparent as personal awareness. So it's easy to associate Zu with the mind because, as we demonstrate with the standard model, it's the point where the master control center, or MCC, of the mind system is plotted at 4.0 on our Zu line. And this just so happens to correspond to the threshold point between the physical and spiritual existences. In addition to representing the element behind what some individuals of the mystical persuasion have considered cosmic consciousness, or some other broad existential definition, Zu also represents an individual life force or specific spiritual life energy. The specific spiritual life energy that imbues, impinges, or otherwise controls the physical manifestations of life. It is a combination of the specific, the subjective, and personal terms, along with those existential, universal, and cosmic ones, that has given rise to a plethora of cultural mythologies and mystical traditions in the past concerning unique beliefs about the phenomenon and presence of this energy in the observable universe. So we all share the same observable universe, and now we've been left with more than enough words to describe it. What do they mean? And we've come up with a term from the earliest lectures, actually, some of the earliest materials regarding next-gen systemology from a decade ago. But the activity we described as perturbation, being perturbed, because we were only able to observe and sense manifestations and behaviors of phenomenon that we see taking place, but they're being influenced or directed, controlled from an exterior or otherwise unseen and undetectable source. And this is what we were calling perturbation, just a way of describing this causal nature, describing an other, because it's not accounted for in the equations of physics. And there we have our glass ceiling of physics. This other is what many refer to when speaking of the spiritual, the metaphysical, or even the supernatural. Although I don't much care for that last term, I just want to stress very firmly, there is no phenomenon in the physical universe that is supernatural. The physical universe is only natural. Now, the naturalness may simply operate by some unrecognized aspect of cosmic law. And so things appear very mysterious out there, very, very mystical, very magical. But that kind of goes away when you start to understand and observe cosmic law. The cosmic law automation specifically governs all expressions of manifestation in the physical universe, regardless of the source or directed control of that energy from within or an exterior source. It doesn't matter. So that's very important, because that very concept seems to be missed in a lot of traditions and so forth, which is why we even came up with our own term for it back in the day. Okay, so I know you think, we're up here feeling so smart, though a lot of you know that now nearly 25 years of research and experimentation has gone into this. And what we've seen there are some perceptive individuals across the timeline of human history that have, in some way, caught a sense that there is an additional element behind all that we are able to observe in the physical universe. Even those higher minds that first conceived of the sciences and philosophies, the ones that are now stretched out, so thinly in their own directions by their followers that we can practically see through them at this point. But, those higher minds that first conceived them, they were able to recognize this cosmic code, or universal agent, that imbued certain aspects or concentrations of physical energy and matter with something that had only really been religiously treated as spirit, and perhaps even more esoterically as the cosmic mind, some such concept. But now we're really able to better identify Zu in our wider, more encompassing, holistic systems theory approach. This is not to slide out all of what has formerly been presented by the innovators and creators and actualized individuals on the track, but which were mainly restricted to their own combined semantic understanding as language barrier for their own time periods, in effectively communicating what they knew on an objective, static, written medium. So in spite of what experiences, levels of awareness, or other realizations that may be achieved by an individual, any individual, their own understanding. We're looking at their ability to share such reality with other individuals. This comes back always to the communication of information and energy, both internally among one's own personal systems and then in any interactions with other systems. So it should be understood as we move forward with systemology. I'm not trying to slide out any truly self-honest attempts that were made by our predecessors of lore, especially when they have caught a sense of this other, regardless of how they chose to classify or incorporate this understanding into their work. Even when it could not be incorporated directly, such as the consideration of spiritual values in physical equations. You don't see many spiritual values in physical equations. You don't see the observer actually in the equations. We know about the observer effect now, but it hasn't been accounted for mathematically, and it never will be, not in the physical sciences. So we're at least certain that individuals hold certain points of fact in mind when they participate in the realm, the reality, the world that we all share. And this is reflected in their communications, regardless of what their actual experiences are. For example, we see many aspects. That's epistemology. It's developed very strongly by Rene Descartes. It's simply induce a method of thinking, a method of knowing what's real, what's true, epistemology. So Rene Descartes would simply include the word God to account for all infinity in concerning the other. The other. So, you got to remember too, he was writing for a predominantly Christian audience. We see similar methods taken up by Scottish Episcopalian minister Reverend Robert Kirk, who's famously writes the accounts of the Elven Fairy Commonwealth. We talk about this in our Elvenomicon, Secret Traditions of Elves and Fairies. So, considerable attention is given in his literature toward persuading the reader simply to separate their idea of elves and fairies from the demons of biblical mythology. I mean, just right there, that was an upgrade from former beliefs, which the church had sought to maintain. So, of course, the control of intellectual authority, has strongly shifted now to scientists and medical professions. We're in the industrial age. We don't look to the church anymore. And it's interesting too, because many of these figures were also quite aware of something in the back of all their calculations, something that could not be present in their physical calculations. But we've seemed to look past that. We've looked beyond that. We've said, yep, but taken no responsibility for it, and there it lies. And we consider German-born theoretical physicist, philosopher, Max Planck. He was awarded the Nobel Prize sometime, I forget, but for the inception of quantum theory. I mean, this became the baseline and a standard for researches into atomic and subatomic particles. Now, I mean, that's where we're at today still. And we would expect, we would expect a very mechanistic description of a clockwork universe, just as we were prone to see in the past. But that is not what provided the innovations to better understand the functions of the physical universe that we're using today. Planck writes, I've got this quote here, share it with you. So Planck writes, all matter originates and exists by virtue of a force which brings the particles of atoms to vibration, holding this minute atomic solar system together. We must assume behind this force the presence of a consciousness and intelligent mind, and that this mind is the matrix of all matter. So that's what Max Planck's got to say about this, and this is the guy that has brought us to the point of even having this quantum sciences to understand. So there's something behind the force, behind what we see, and it's a consciousness. And there you have it. So, even quantum physics understands zoo. Now, critical observations were made by the more philosophic-minded of the science community. But many of these original concepts, some that are now often revived under new semantics, just get pulled back up and given a new name, these were threshed out of the original approved methodologies due to their esoteric qualities a long time ago. And here we're confronted with them again. And that's just kind of, once we started separating pseudosciences from the academics, we started to see a larger gap take place concerning, well, really any intellectual development. What developments do we have today? We're simply speeding up or improving upon existing models. Of course, there's those taken from covertly recovered technologies, but of which are not the result of, or even providing further methods, true human innovation toward an actualized evolution. And when I say actualized evolution or spiritual evolution, I don't mean to seem all pie in the sky fluffy. Spiritual evolution, we're not talking about genetics or some sort. But what I'm speaking of is an evolution for humanity that is not dependent on external technologies for it to ensue. Such external modes of mechanistic thinking are certainly going to only entrap the human spirit further into clockwork barriers that cannot be recovered from so long as their automation remains outside personal control. The human condition has plunged deeper into mechanistic worldviews as a counter-effort to the mysticism and esoteric occultism that rose up during the Renaissance, which in and of itself was a counter-effort against the social suppression by the church. I mean, these cycles continue endlessly when left to their own accord. And, well, that is how systems work. Given their movement and action by following a basic pendulum swing. But this activity in motion should not be treated as mysterious, because if we are meant to solidify any type of understanding about ourself, life, the universe, it should be understood that there is a pattern and ordering beneath everything that exists, and when it relates to the physical universe, we refer to this, specifically this code, we refer to this, the governance of this matrix, as cosmic law. And this is the means and manner by which we have existence, we have manifestation. And the means and manner by which this cosmic law is communicated throughout the universe is what seems to have the scientific community confounded, or at least at a glass ceiling. They are in the habit of observing, measuring, and playing with accessible effects that they can see, rather than encroach on the realm of philosophy in any way. So, given how many of the mathematical and logical and physical sciences, most of the ologies, have been literally pulled out of their resting places among philosophical schools, there's little that remains in the domain of philosophy today aside from the utmost immaterial and metaphysical. I mean, the schools of physiology, schools of physics, physics of motion, physiology of the body, even the psychology of them. These are all pulled ones from philosophical schools of philosophy. And the actual I, the self, that was discovered in the folds of classical philosophy has never left its nestled zone there. You know, the scientists, they've never, not once, have never been able to get the I under the microscope. So there is a consciousness present, which we refer very specifically as awareness in the Mardukite Systemology paradigms. And it very closely relates to what we are treating as the definition of Zu. Speaking about awareness. We speak quite loosely now of substance forms, matter, energy, and metaphysical forces, but, you know, this way of understanding has not always been so casual and common. In fact, it was all once very esoteric, only understood in the semantic terms of magic and mysticism. And again, this is not to say there is no validity to the methods they represent, you know, magic and so forth, but the position of the observer in such paradigms is still looking at effects as a mystery, as mysterious, from some unknown cause. Even if a cause is attributed to some other element or particle or spirit, it is assumed that the magician themselves is not being placed in the position of cause. And many of the grimoires warn about essentially becoming a victim to one's own effect in the process. It's surprising that many of the methods are effective to any extent when they're operated from such low energy points of fear or even anger, which seem to be the primary emotional motivators behind these lower forms of magic. So we're looking higher now. You know, where the pathway to self-honesty that is described in the modern tradition of Mardukite Zuism and the spiritual technology of Systemology focuses on personal defragmentation, and by doing so, increasing the certainty of the individual to control their self-direction. In the past, we've been taught that certain forms of physical energy and matter will combine to form life and awareness, but it has been demonstrated in Systemology that this necessarily comes from a higher point of cause as source, and a point of spiritual control that is exterior to what we are able to calculate concerning the physical universe. In fact, we can really only demonstrate the continuum of Zu as a representation of this. A singular expression of a specific type of energy that is directed across all existences. Now, at certain levels of heavy solid concentration nearest the continuity levels of the entropic physical universe, we have very solid manifestations of this energy, and at higher frequencies we see that the power of Zu interacts less and less directly onto the lower matter itself, but it radiates. That is to say, it sets off a chain reaction along the Zu line that reaches other frequency types. Let me just explain that again because it's very important. Zu excites Zu at other levels of frequency via a chain reaction. And this chain reaction occurs along a continuum that we call the Zu line. And this is what makes the interconnected activity function really at all. All the interrelated systems of any existence. It is this concept of treating Zu as a radiation, much like the electromagnetic spectrum, that actually allowed for the latest effective developments in our systemology. And this unfolded as an understanding of the Zu line. So, just to understand, this realization is what turned our older standard model into something workable and applicable for our purposes, as opposed to remaining simply an aesthetically pleasing Kabbalistic model to post up on your refrigerators as a A+ artistic accomplishment. Okay, such vanity would hardly serve any purposes here in promoting some beneficial gains for those that are actively seeking ways to improve their own development towards self-actualization and assist with helping usher in this new crystal age of humanity that is critically needed if we are to continue our spiritual evolution toward a direction of reunification with our spiritual source and the self-honest actualized realization of operating the self in a crystal clear state of self, from and as self. And perhaps for the first time in our extensive spiritual journey, which has spanned many lives and universes. It is perhaps in this lifetime that we will finally realize and actualize what we have been searching for all of this time. And we will discover is be the first real thing to carry us beyond the physical incarnation. This is what you've been coming for, people. This is why you keep coming back. We forget. You do it again, and you hit restart. Aren't you tired of hitting restart? Well, before we move on to another incarnation, let's take a break. Thank you for listening.